Paul, I
Fab.
clicked the wrong button.
I see that. You disappear. But hey, you got the music straight this time.
I did get the music straight, so we're getting there. So we need to do this show daily so that I can get better exponentially. Weekly is too slow for my brain.
Okay. There we go. From now on, gents, ladies and gentlemen, the show is on daily.
No, we tried that. Remember when we did the What If sessions during the...
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, those were fun.
Here, I'm going to give promotion to my little local cafe here while I'm drinking my tea.
For anybody who happens to be around Paul.
In Point Claire.
In Point Claire. All right, Paul, today we're taking a marketing track. I hope you're excited.
I am. I am excited. I'm excited.
So listen, this is kind of a grand scheme of things because a while ago we both talked about it be not enough companies have this vision of how sales and marketing tied together. And, we talked a lot about the sales process. And then a few weeks ago, I was like, but we never really talked about, I called it a marketing process, but I never, for lack of a better word, but we never really talked about how marketing should structure itself, right? We've done little tidbits, like we did the SEO episode with CT Moore, and we did like a lot of, content episodes, but we never really talked about how you need to structure everything, because there is a structure to marketing. It's not just doing a podcast once in a while. I mean, that's fine for us, but for an organization, you definitely need to map out.
I'm really excited because honestly, I'm a sales guy.
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I'll be really honest right now.
Yeah.
As a salesperson, I've always thought these marketing guys, where the hell are they? They're all over the place. You're doing this, you're doing that. Like what are they? They're talking about branding and they're talking about this, and then there's that process, and then you're like, everyone says different things. So I'm really excited about this. I'm not an expert, but I have a lot of questions. So
nice. I'm going to say that's a big problem. Big part of the problem is a lot of marketers have a hard time saying or visualizing that they have a process, and so they get kind of pulled in all these directions, and slowly but surely, or quickly, depending on how fast the company moves, you kind of become what the owner or the leadership, like upper leadership, believes marketing is. So if the upper leadership believes marketing is about creating pamphlets for the sales team, well, that's what marketing ends up doing, right? And so a big problem that a lot of marketers have is that they're like, instead of like trying to build a process that makes sense, they just kind of become a bit of everything, and they kind of get distracted by every flashy little new, okay, well, now TikTok is there. Like, can we do B2B on TikTok? I don't know. And like everybody's, so I would think like step one of your, let's call it, I'm trying to find a better word than marketing process, but step one is really try to find a goal that ties back to revenue. And I think that's the biggest challenge that a lot of marketers have.
I think you said it before we went online. You said mapping your marketing process. So mapping the marketing, right? I like that.
Yeah. And so number one, the number one reasons why marketers don't do that is that they don't tie their marketing efforts back to revenue. And so for sales, revenue is obvious, right? Like that's what you're hired to do. You're hired to generate sales and hopefully, if everything's set up properly, generate a profit, right, for the company. So that revenue goal is almost built in. But for marketers, it's not. I mean, look, I'm excluding anything that's kind of e-commerce and where the whole transaction happens online, because that's maybe a little different. I'm talking more about kind of these B2B companies where there is a sales team. So because there is a handoff to sales, like the revenue element for marketers is not always obvious. And the biggest pitfall there is that while we tie marketing back to the ultimate end goal, but that's what one of the big things that creates a lot of conflicts between sales and marketing, because sales is like, well, we send over all these leads. Not my fault. Salespeople can't close them. And then salespeople are like, yeah, but all your leads are shitty, so no wonder we can't close them. And so marketers don't achieve their revenue goals in the end. So I think the first step is how can you as a marketing team tie yourself back to revenue? And maybe that's leads generated, visits to your websites, or there's a lot of different proxy metrics, let's call it that. But I think that's the number one thing. What's going to be the value that everybody can agree on that is related to revenue? So is it qualified leads? Fine. What's a qualified lead? It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And if we can generate that, this means X number of revenue.
That's interesting. But I mean, that's an age-old debate, right? Whether the qualified leads will turn into revenue, right? Because a qualified lead is just a lead. It's not actual, a sale. So it's interesting. But let's talk about.
And we talked a bit about this during our sales process episodes, but there's a conversion rate between each stage, right? So that, let's say at the end of the day, the sales department converts, I don't know, 40% of leads into sales, 30%, whatever makes sense. Well, that if you generate 30 qualified leads, 30% of those will generate revenue. And so, there's 100 a good number, or like 1,000 or 5.
Can we back up a little bit first? Yep. Because, okay, so you're right. Some different CEO is going to want marketing to do different things, but isn't that the first thing you should establish? Like, let's say you're talking to me, I'm the CEO, and I'm going to say to you, Fab, my sole purpose with marketing is to create leads for my salespeople to close. Well, then right? So when you're mapping your marketing, it's going to be marketing generates qualified leads, right?
Exactly.
Or the CEO is going to say, hey, look, my objective this year with marketing is to make it such that my brand is number one in this trade magazine. Okay. Yeah. So is it not fair to say that before you map out your marketing process, you figure out what your objectives are?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was kind of hinting to. I think as a marketing team, you have to have at least one of your objectives tie back to revenue. Because the danger with having other types of metrics is that they seem all good January 1st when the outlook of the world seems rosy and everybody's pumped and everybody's for sure that they'll exceed all their revenue targets by 6,000%. But then come November, or even before September, when the sales team isn't achieving their targets and whatnot, all of a sudden all these branding goals that you were given kind of go down the drain, and then like, we need to generate leads now, and then you get into this kind of like rabbit hole, or you fall down this rabbit hole of like trying to generate leads, and then you get into all these bad behaviors and so on and so forth. So you're right, you do need to have specific objectives, but I would always encourage you, first and foremost, you have to at least one that ties back to revenue.
Yeah, well, we're getting in semantics here, but what if the CEO's objective with marketing is like, no, I don't want you to be tied to revenue. I just want you to make me on my brand number one. It's not, I'll take care of that. I'm Nike. You're part of the branding marketing.
Yep. I mean, that's fine. I mean, again, I was talking about like the B2B stuff. Like the B2C is slightly different because they live in a very different world.
So you're talking about B2B where there's a real, in your opinion, a B2B marketer should have a goal to either revenue or efficiency or something that's quantifiable in the end.
Right, because if you go back to your sales process, right, which the first stage is like kind of your prospects or whoever you're trying to bring to the next stage, right? Well, like, is role of marketing to fill part of that group, right, of prospects? Is that part of their role? Because we know that if somebody gets into that stage 0 that you call, there's a 30% chance that they'll close, right? Or 10% or whatever the actual number is. It doesn't matter as much. But then marketing could say, well, we need to generate 1,000 of those prospects this year, right? And so we know we have a very fixed objective goal or target to achieve. And I think if we've said that and then we know, because then we intrinsically know that there's going to be value in what the marketing team is going to be putting into.
Okay. All right.
And that's what I'm trying to say. And that's when we can start mapping out our process, right? So in the same way that you map out your sales process, so you have your stage 0 and then your stage 1, which is your discovery call, and like all the questions that you need answered, or the answers to the questions that you need answered, right? And like however stages that takes you, and so on and so forth. The same way you need to think about marketing, right? So if you know that your end goal now is qualified leads, well, what does a qualified lead look like, right? So you need these objective criteria in the same way that sales needs these objective criteria, right? You don't want a salesperson to be able to move somebody forward depending on how they're feeling that day, right? You need objective criteria. Same thing with marketing. A qualified lead is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If we know these things, they're a qualified lead. Sales agrees, marketing agrees, the president agrees, we're all good.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So then you can move backward, because the reality in marketing is that you're not going to be able to always out of the box find people that fit all these criteria up front, right? Not everybody's going to be willing to talk to, let's say one of your criteria is willing to talk to sales. Not everybody's going to be willing to talk to sales out of the box, right? You might need to do some things along the line. And so that's when you're going to start mapping out your process. Let's say you're like, okay, well, before I know what my end goal is. So what's the stage before that? Well, stage before that, maybe I can know if somebody's willing to give me their first name, their last name, and their biggest pain point or the biggest challenge right now. We'll say that's a lead, right? So we have leads, and they come before marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads. And then okay, well, not everybody's going to be willing to give me that out of the box. So then we're going to have, let's say, a suspect stage or a subscriber stage where it's just, we're just going to collect some basic information. As long as somebody's willing to give me their email address, I'm going to be able to market them and hopefully bring them to stage 2. Stage 2 is first name, last name, and biggest pain point. And then once I have that, I can bring them to stage 3, which is, the 3 more criteria that we decided would identify them as a qualified lead.
Okay, I have there's a few things that are popping into my head. So
awesome.
Wouldn't a lot of these let's talk about qualified leads. Okay, so let's say that's the goal. Wouldn't a lot of the process be very similar in most companies? What do I mean by that? Is that we have to identify what we're looking for, but wouldn't it always be, well, okay, what's the persona? How are we going to reach them? What is it we want them to be able to do? What is it we're hoping to achieve from them? And how many of these do we have to call to get a closing deal?
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that your sales process is going to be, on a macro level, very similar, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have your
Exactly.
stage 0. I mean,
you're talking to people at first. You're finding out what they want. You're asking them questions. You're finding out their needs. You're finding out their wants. You're finding out their motivation to buy. Then you're finding out their urgency, you're quantifying it, you want to know if they're willing to invest, if they're committed, who's the competition, and boom, you're off to the races. So
exactly.
But it means different things in different businesses. But really, so when we're talking about marketing in qualified leads or bringing stuff to salespeople that they can deliver, or even, you might even have your marketing might take care of the sales process all the way to the end, right? If it's all done online, right? And you're tracking people, and that's great. But I want to, what I find strange is that, and I've seen this in some companies, that sometimes you don't know exactly who your best persona is, right? You got to do some testing, and you got to be willing to make mistakes. Like, what's your feeling of that? What's your feeling on that? Like, how do you gauge if your marketing team is a fucking bunch of bozos or if they're making learning mistakes?
In the same way, right? You have to tie back to an objective. It's the same thing. How do you know your salespeople are a bunch of bozos or they're still early in their learning development, right? It's the same type of idea. It's like, you want to be like, okay, well, we said and you agreed that you would be generating a certain number of qualified leads this year. And now we're March and you're very far away from that number. And you're hoping that your marketing team has said, like, yeah,
okay,
this conversion rate is, it like takes a month, or whatever.
Let me be devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a new industry. It's a new product. It's a new, brave new world. So it's April 2020.
Yeah.
It's a new AI product that's never existed before. You have to do marketing, but you don't know. You got to make a lot of mistakes, don't you? You can't be sure. So, well, we tried this, didn't work that well. And the point I'm coming to is I've often heard this in companies that have had success is, look, we tried a few things and we allowed ourselves to make mistakes.
Right.
And then we grew from there. Like, how does that apply in marketing? And I don't mean a bunch of bozos like how many times do you fail until you say, well, we failed a lot, maybe this is a bad idea?
Yeah, again, you have to be able to tie it back to something objective. And when we said earlier qualified lead, right? If you're in the example you gave, like we just started last, like 3 months ago, we kind of have an idea of who we want to talk to, but we don't know. So maybe a qualified lead is just somebody who's willing to give us our phone number so that the sales team can call them, right? And then the sales team, as they're going through the sales process, starts building, okay, well, you know what? But the company has to be making at least $10 million in revenue, right? Okay, well, that's another criteria that we're going to add to our qualified lead. And, obviously as you're starting out, your objectives are a bit looser, right? Like, so that you can be like, okay, well, obviously at the beginning of the year, we said 600 qualified leads because it was just going to be first name, last name, email, and phone number. But as the year went on and we added more criteria, we've readjusted that target along the way. But having an objective number doesn't mean that you're fixated by it. It's just that you're trying to give yourself a benchmark to validate whether what you're doing makes sense or not. And I remember a long time ago, last year, we had an interview with and if his name escapes me there, Geller, but what's that? Rob Geller, and he was saying like, well, we tried out a lot of things, and he was saying, I wish we had like this really great strategy, but we tried out different things and stuff like that, and nothing prevents you from doing that when you have a whole bunch of sales teams and you need to have a marketing attached to it. You just need to be able to grow with it. But the biggest danger that you have is if you're not getting your sales team or your marketing team, to build some objective criteria along the way, politics will get involved at some point, right? This whole idea of like sales will be, well, the leads you send me are shitty, so we weren't able to decide whether, you don't know what's working, what's not working, right? So I think you need
the blame game.
You definitely need some way of measuring your success, and it goes for branding as well, right? Like,
now let me ask you something. Okay, and this is a sales thing because we've said this before in sales, is that you don't really measure the success of a salesperson because there's a lot of luck involved. You measure the effort. Shouldn't it be the same thing in marketing? Is your objective okay? And I know I'm throwing a wrench. I like doing this, but because you said, okay, I have an objective. Of course, you have a revenue objective. Of course, you have a qualified lead objective. But short of people being bozos, are you not going to recompense the effort? Because the effort is what indicates what didn't work and what works. And you're finding out your data mining, and you're finding out a path, right? Because I see marketing sometimes as it's a guy going into a cave without a flashlight trying to find his way to the other end. You're going to try some different things because you're not sure. Look, we're going to try this strategy here. We're going to build the persona like this. Oh, we're not getting as many calls we'd like to. Let's tweak it a little bit. Oh, went up by 10%. Let's change the way so you're continuously reevaluating so that the guy's finding his way through, or the girl's finding her way through the cave, and boom, you get to the other end. So that's why you're looking for the effort of finding things out rather than just the end revenue, right?
Yes.
No? Sorry, I'm being too academic here.
No, I mean, you're right. But I don't think they're mutually exclusive necessarily.
No,
right?
They're not mutually exclusive. No, they're not.
Exactly. And so, because the danger on just looking at effort could be like, well, we spent all year trying to figure out how to make TikTok work for our business, and it's just not working. And you're like, okay, but we still have a business to run here.
Yeah.
And it's good that you're trying stuff out. And it's
the same thing in sales, right? This guy's doing 100 cold calls a day, and he's putting in all the effort, and he never gets a call. He never gets a meeting. Well, maybe he just doesn't have what it takes.
Right, and that's and obviously that's where your extra layer of your leadership team comes into play, right? Your sales leader, your marketing leader, to be able to coach somebody and to know when to pull the plug on certain types of efforts, and to know when to coach them. Is there something going wrong, like going on in their family? Like there's that extra layer that adds on top. But for sure, yes, the effort. If you're like, we're going to generate leads, but nobody's doing anything, but I think to me that the point I'm trying to drill home is that you need to have these objective criteria to be able to determine whether the effort makes sense or not, right? Like to just be like, we're going to try Snapchat. Okay, but why? Or how are you even going to determine that it's helping us out? You know what our business objectives are for the year. How are you going to determine whether Snapchat's working out for us or not?
Yeah, and so it's having KPIs and goals.
Yeah.
So what are your performance indicators and what are the goals you're going? I know there's a new fancy word for performance indicators. I forget.
OKRs.
OKRs, yeah. What do those stand for again?
What's the O stand for again? It's objectives and key results, something like that.
Okay. OKRs, okay. So now we have an example for marketing lead. Now, let's talk about something else that marketing does. Like, what else does marketing do other than find leads for sales, or other than selling, doing the full sales cycle digitally, for example, right? From finding people and to walking them through the full buying, the whole customer experience situation, the online customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one thing that's interesting, Fab. Because is it marketing that where does marketing stop and customer experience start?
It doesn't have to. I think
there's no salespeople involved.
I think this idea that things start and stop, are kind of a bit, there's maybe owners, like maybe customer success owns the customer success, but marketing is involved, like in the same way that sales might be involved in customer success, right? Like if the salesperson is not onboarding the right type of client, or maybe the salesperson still get involved in the relationship, I think, and more, and this is kind of a HubSpot philosophy. They're the ones that brought it out, which is like more and more you need to gear all your processes towards the customer's success. And I think everybody at the end of the day, each department needs to be like, does this make sense for my customer at the end of the day? So to be able to say like, where does it start? Where does it stop? I don't know if it's that relevant anymore, right? I think everybody needs to be like, okay, well, what's marketing doing within the customer success journey? What's sales doing, and what is customer service doing at the beginning in the lead generation process? Like they might be involved too, finding customer success stories and so on and so forth.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Yes.
I'm a really pragmatic, CEO, and I'm analytical, and I'm like stickler, and I want everything. So how would you? You're talking to me, and I said, okay, Fab, I'm going to hire you. How would you map the marketing process? Like, how would you build it? Like, what are the steps? Tell me the high level steps. And I don't just mean marketing qualified. I mean everything, the whole freaking thing. Like, how do you build that process to decide what goes where?
Right. In a very similar way that you would your sales process, right? You probably have a good 3 to 4 consistent steps, right? Like I said before, your step 1 is going to be, for lack of a better, your subscribers, people that just signed up, they signed up to your podcast, they like kind of what you're doing, but you don't know much about them, what their problems are, what their concerns are. So that'll be your stage 1. Then your stage 2 will probably be, let's call it lead, right? So we have a whole bunch of subscribers. Let's see how many can become leads, or how many leads can we attract straight up. So again, within an objective criteria, let's say and that's where the criteria changes from company to company. Some companies are able to collect a lot of information quickly, some companies not. So then your step 2 would be leads. How many subscribers can we convert into leads, basically? And then your step 3 will probably be something along the lines of a marketing qualified lead. So according to marketing, according to the definitions that we set up, these leads are ready to be passed over to sales. And then you kind of have that hybrid stage, probably your stage 0, which is like your sales qualified lead, right? These are the leads that the marketing qualified leads that salespeople have accepted. These are the ones I'm going to work with. I validated like the 3-4 more points that we need to validate that maybe marketing can't pick up on, and we've accepted that this is a sales qualification. So those are kind of traditional ways of
okay. So if I'm this really, sorry, are you done?
Yep.
Okay. So if I'm a really pragmatic CEO, you can literally come up and you could write down, like I do with my sales process step. I have stage 0. I know I'm really fancy. I got stage 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right?
Yeah.
So let's I like the way you describe that, because as a sales guy, as a CEO, as an owner of my own company, and you an owner of your own company, it turns me on to think, okay, the marketing guy is actually going to give me a mapped out process of how he's going to deal with the different steps of what needs to be done for the marketing to have success, to help me achieve that final goal of making money or increasing margins or becoming more efficient, or
Yeah, and
a new
exactly.
market.
So you start with your final quote unquote. Again, I know marketing, sales, and customer service are kind of a fluid, but fluid kind of responsibilities, and should be present from A to Z. All three of them should be present from A to Z. But let's call it the last stage of marketing, which would be the first stage of sales, right? That, like, your famous stage zero, right? What is a good stage zero prospect, right? What are the things that you need? Well, obviously you need some basic contact information. You can't have a stage zero lead without a phone number, for example, and stuff like that. And so once you've looked at your stage zero, fine. What comes before stage zero? Let's call it -1. Okay, well, these are your marketing qualified leads. So this is marketing saying, you know what? There's no way of us really being able to determine online what the true need is for somebody. Maybe they're able to, maybe they're not. But let's assume that they're not able to. Like, we've asked people online and they lie. They don't really know how to formulate it. And so the way we'll qualify a lead is by having somebody say, yes, I want to talk to sales. Whether that means they've sent an email, filled out a form, interacted with a chatbot or a live chat or whatnot. And then you'll move backward. Fine, how do I get people to talk to sales? Well, we want to make sure it's the right people. So we need XYZ information, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Now, I come, I was as you know, I was in advertising a long time, and
yep.
The role of advertising in a B2C world is very prominent. Right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's part of marketing, but it's a huge part of marketing.
Yeah.
It's an infinite part of marketing, right? When you're about a B2C product. I want to touch that on the B2B world. How do you, so, you're nurturing these leads, and we're not talking about how do you map that advertising process? Like, how do you decide how the outbound's going to work? Because I think that's where a lot of the magic happens, right? It's what we're going to do to be outbound, what we're going to do to attract these people. How do you decide? Is there a process to best figure out how to do that, let's say, outbound or inbound advertising? Like, I don't know if you call it outbound. My brain doesn't work today. I have a cold. Like the B2B stuff that you're going to put out there on LinkedIn, on Facebook, in trade magazines. How do you decide what to do? What do you need to hire an expert in advertising, or is that something you should be counting on your marketing department to help you with?
I mean, it depends, right? It depends on your maturity as a company, right? So I know a lot of companies that kind of do it in-house because they're not really mature on the advertising front. And so spending on an agency doesn't make sense. Others work with an agency. And I think, determining where you're going to place yourself depends, first, you're right, on whether you're doing it in-house or not. An agency usually will come with a lot of experience, and hopefully you're working with an agency that knows your clientele and at least is able to do some research. But I would say, I'll answer two things. So one, there's two types of ads, right? So the one that you're going to have more your lead generation ads, and then your demand generation. Ads are really geared towards converting whoever's seeing it into one of your stages in your process, right? So some ads will be very high level, and it's just getting people to sign up for your blog, let's say. Others will be more middle, and it's just generating leads, let's say. And some will be very bottom funnel, generating marketing qualified leads. Then your branding ads, right? And I was having actually an interesting discussion in our sales and marketing group with one of the reps, Steve, I believe it was, who was saying, like, his company now doesn't do advertising and marketing, and they used to. And for him, there's been a huge difference, right? Like, he's noticed it. Like, the branding ads help get known. So there's that balance first. Second, where are you going to do it? The ideal is you have to do your research for it. If you know nothing about your audience, you need to do your research. Where are they online? And so you got to listen to conversations that are happening online. Listen to, if you have a strong enough social presence, like comments that are happening. If, let's say, you're a sales consultant, while going and participating in different sales consulting Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups, just to you need to do your research to see or to hear where people are at. I think that would be stage one. Again, agencies will usually have like some not AI, some IP in there. They're going to have some intellectual property. They might be able to speed that up for you. But if you're doing it yourself, I would say listen to what your audience, listen to your audience. Go online, listen to, participate in groups, or listen to what happened in groups and stuff like that. For example, I mean, just me, I have a Twitter search set up for HubSpot, and I just regularly go in and I see what people are talking about, and are they drawing back to other websites and this like that. I'm not necessarily reaching out or prospecting them. I'm just there to listen, to see what people who talk about HubSpot, where are they, what are they talking about, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what you want to be.
Yeah. So you have to map out that process too, right? Am I going to do it internally? Am I going to do it externally? How complex it is? How much data exists, right? If you're just a new company in a super competitive market, there might be a ton of data out there already, right?
Yeah.
So then that's easy. If you're a new product in a new market, I mean, then it's kind of that brave new world. So that's interesting, because that's always, Fab, that's always been very, very vast, large, and to a certain extent, I think that's what confuses a lot of people in where the role of marketing starts and where it stops. And in my world, my wife's studying anatomy right now, and she says it's really interesting, Paul, because she says the muscle turns into ligament, like it's like there's no defined, but at one point it's ligament, at one point it's muscle, but they actually, it's not like it attaches. It like slowly the muscle turns into ligament that turns into bone.
Yeah.
So, and what I would say is, let's say the sales is bone, and advertising is the muscle. Well, marketing is a ligament. It's neither sales and it's neither advertising, but they all tie into each other, right? And I don't think you can separate them.
No, and that's what we were saying before, right? It's becoming more of it's fluid. The limitations are fluid, because even if you take your stages of your sales process, I'm sorry, if you sit down and you look and you're working with your reps and you're seeing where the challenges are to convert a person from one step to the next, I'm sure there's a lot of things that marketing can do, and it might be more behind the scenes and making sure, like I said, if you have a big enough pipeline, and I've done this in the past. If we had a big enough pipeline, well, you can actually target ads to people that are in your sales process. Obviously, you're going to be sending them different messages, right? You're not going to be like, hey, discover question Z, like everybody knows because they're already talking to Paul, but maybe they don't know, like, hey, top 10, top client, like, or clients in the healthcare industry that have had success with, questions, and like download the case study, right? And so, and in the same way that sales should be very involved in the sales process, marketing process early on, to be able to determine who these qualified leads are, what are they talking about. I mean, I've already had a colleague, and I've done it myself too. I would physically go sit next to the salespeople to listen to their conversations on the phone to see how prospects were talking about our service or our product, so that I could then update our landing pages and our emails to be able to have that same conversation. And now with voice, like call recorders and stuff like that, it's even easier to do than it was back then.
So Fab, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's even possible to have a proper sales strategy that doesn't take into account the marketing strategy?
You could have a sales strategy that's a very strong sales strategy, but I think you're capping your growth by not including marketing.
You'll probably say the same thing the other way too, right? You can't have a marketing strategy that doesn't encompass sales, right?
Exactly. I mean, I've worked with a company like that were really strong on inbound and very weak on sales. I mean, they were struggling. They were having tons of leads and more leads than they knew what to do with. They
It's
just
funny you said that, because perfect example. In the last week, I've had 3 or 4 people that have reached out to me. I'm not sure if it's their company or them directly, and they say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about this or that." And all of them, I was just testing. I said, "Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely." And then half of them haven't followed up. No follow-up message to say, "Okay, let's book a time this time." I said, "Sure, let's reach out," and nothing. So, we're human beings. It's not perfect, but ultimately, I think if you have a well-oiled machine, your strategy will follow through.
Bingo.
So, hey, Fab, I think, I don't know, is there any closing remarks on this? Because I know you and I can talk about this for hours. Or is there something else that you wanted to mention before a closing remark?
No, because I have a hard stop, so I'm gonna have to go. But I think make sure you have a strong marketing process. I'll think of a better conclusion another time.
Are you being kicked out of the basement, Fab?
Yeah, I have another call in a minute.
Okay, all right. So good chatting with you.
Bye, Paul. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to our discussion.
Bye.